This may not run 45 minutes.
That's all right.
All right, so hi, if we haven't met yet, I'm Mike Sandman from Cisco, and just a little bit of background. I've been with Cisco pretty much since I graduated, almost 10 years, and I've been involved with traffic control pretty much since it released to open source, so about 3 years to the day, I guess. Mainly, like I do some development, but mostly I've been focused on operations. This moves, okay. So the presentation I have is on operational challenges in traffic control. This is basically a summary of some issues we've encountered during actual customer network operations or things that we have to work around to maintain best operational practices or optimal customer experience. Largely they are related to either configuration changes or maintenance windows, or a lot are related to software installation and upgrades. And most of the issues that are, hopefully the issues that I have in this presentation are not just simple bugs that are one-off fixes, but require a little bit more design. I have them as feature-sized changes. So what I'm hoping for is possibly some discussion generated around some of these issues. If they're solved problems already, I would love to know how to work with them better. And if it's just a simple bug, then I'll file a JIRA for it. I have 4 issues in the slide deck. One is for selective or rolling CRConfig updates to traffic routers. From a high level, traffic router config pushes are all or nothing today.
Yeah.
And we have reasons to do them one at a time. I'll get into that in the next slide. Another one is, we refer to it as stickiness, but this is the concept of when a client gets redirected for an HTTP delivery service to a particular edge cache, that client will, or some clients anyway, will stream from that edge cache until channel change, which has caused some problems for maintenance windows and for upgrades and things like that. Another one is just sort of a general topic for managing traffic ops profiles. Specifically, we've run into some difficulty when we upgrade, especially when we upgraded ATS recently for TC 2.1. Merging the old profiles with the new profiles with the profiles we have in production. And also how to deal with the profiles when you have multiple people operating the CDN who may not necessarily be talking to each other daily. And finally, if there's time left over, similar to the client admin or the cache admin downs, the admin down of traffic routers, and how it relates to DNS caching. So for the selective CRConfig updates, so we have a policy generally for when we're operating in the field that we always do our, especially upgrades, but also any risky config changes in kind of a rolling fashion, meaning we'll upgrade one server, let it sit for a little bit, verify, check to make sure everything's okay, then we'll upgrade the other servers. And sometimes sometimes the window will be 15 to 20 minutes in between, sometimes it'll be a full day depending on how long it needs to soak, or if there are kind of cyclic patterns, daily cyclic viewing patterns that will affect the particular config change. So for the traffic router, what this would mean if we were to do this is that most clients would initially be unaffected, 1 over however many traffic routers you have would be the ones that would see the actual change. So the change is restricted to a subset of requests. So if anything isn't right, then it minimizes the impact to end users. Advantages are it's easy to verify the success. We know that it's been done on a single traffic router, so we can look in analytics tools and determine, okay, these traffic routers are operating correctly, the change took effect, the change has no unexpected drawbacks. It's also easier to roll back if there is an issue. We can either pull out the CRConfig on a single traffic router, or we can just turn a single traffic router off and the others will pick up the load. Disadvantages, I don't think there are any of doing it this way, unless the only thing would be if you have a change that needs to roll out that corresponds with a change on the client or the back end, then you kind of do need to do everything at the same time. But other than that, this is...
So this means you want to do a CRConfig update to just one traffic router,
Yeah.
and verify that it
Yeah.
did what you wanted it to do,
Right.
and then push it to the rest of the traffic
Yes.
And you're doing that right now?
router? No.
Yes.
Oh,
We are doing that right now. I will explain how in a couple of slides.
Okay.
What kind of changes can you do there?
A good example would be if you're turning on geo-blocking or geo-limiting, where if you don't necessarily know where your client base is and you don't know if you're going to accidentally block the wrong people, if you push it to one single traffic router, then there's more of it. You can still verify that the feature has been turned on correctly and that it's operating correctly, but you don't impact potentially. It just minimizes the impact by a factor of however many traffic routers you have.
If you identify an issue that's actually happening because of change, you can isolate it to just those clients that are going to that specific traffic router instead of affecting everything.
Which for traffic router is a little bit more difficult than caches, which I touch on that a little bit, due to traffic routers not being geographically mapped to clients the way caches are. So the problem, though, is the traffic routers poll every 60 seconds. It's a poll model for CRConfig. Traffic routers poll every 60 seconds by default. And you can change that default via a hidden parameter, but currently there's no way to disable it. So effectively what that means is all traffic routers will update at the same time. If you don't change this default, 60 seconds is not enough to verify changes.
But
Yeah.
Don't the traffic router pull the configuration from the monitor?
Yes.
So, okay, you want to hold the, okay.
But you can't. Yeah, you want to stop it from doing that.
Yeah.
And there's no way. There is a way to do that, but not on a running traffic router. I'm almost positive it requires a traffic router restart. So what this means, this problem statement really, is that on upgrade, either you're upgrading everything, all the traffic routers at the same time, or the traffic routers are required to run, when some are upgraded and some are not, they're required to run with either an old or a new CRConfig, and I don't know if that's guaranteed. And even standard config changes like geo-blocking, again, is a good example, end up going down to the entire CDN at once. And if something like geo-blocking is wrong, if you're accidentally letting through like France instead of the US, then everyone gets blocked and you have an outage. So we do have a workaround, and I was asking in Slack a while back about looking for this parameter. What you can do is, hey.
Can I just ask a question on the previous?
Yeah.
I mean, you're talking about the justification around geo-blocking. I mean, you still have an outage if you push a bad config to a single traffic router. You're just limiting the damage. So
Yes.
why aren't we doing these tests around clients and their locale ahead of even making the change?
You can do geo-blocking is just an example. You should be doing those tests ahead of time. And yes, you are only limiting the damage, but it's still there's a difference between 100% outage and 20% outage. And in terms of geo-blocking, or another example would be like anonymous blocking. You don't know necessarily that the people that are getting blocked are supposed to be getting blocked. You may end up needing to whitelist them, and I don't know. There's a couple of there's probably other config changes. I can't think of any right now. But for upgrades, you want to verify the upgrade in a rolling fashion. It's just a policy we have. We do this with caches, and we'd like to do this with everything.
So what does the upgrade have to do with that, with the CRConfig?
Because the CRConfig can have new parameters in it, or can have changed parameters, and I don't know that it's guaranteed that the old CRConfigs will work on newer versions.
So should all of the changes that go into traffic router usually, well, I would say almost always, are backwards compatible.
Okay.
And usually have toggles built around them, so you
Okay.
You can deploy with it turned off. I mean, that's typically how we do everything at Comcast is we upgrade to the next version. That feature we want that's in the next version is just disabled. And
Okay.
We upgrade everything and then we flip the parameter and turn it on.
But you turn it on for everything.
Usually, yeah.
Okay.
So, I'm gonna submarine this for just a moment. The NIO-BIO change.
Mhm.
Did you guys deploy that to everything and then found it out?
Yes.
Case in point. That is a good example of being able to just deploy that stuff to that router.
That has nothing to do with the CRConfig though.
Understood. I'm not agree.
Well,
I'm not
you're
gonna disagree
conflating
with
the two
that,
separate things though.
Okay. So,
I understand the
Well-
problem that you're getting at,
Yeah.
but I don't think that that's the same.
We
as CRConfig.
just were not sure that backwards compatibility with old CR configs is guaranteed.
I've never had an issue with that.
Yeah, but I think this goes hand in hand with your last point, right? The putting a traffic router down. I mean, that's what we usually do. We admin down a traffic router, we wait an hour, and then we can upgrade it without any impacts.
right.
Okay.
But this is data within the CRConfig that you're concerned about, like new parameters.
New parameters, or if
breaking
something,
things that are more controlled.
yeah, if something did need to change in the CR config in a way that it was, if a parameter name changed, or if something did change that made it not backwards compatible.
I guess the reason why I keep asking questions is because this seems like it's at odds with the philosophy of how traffic router is supposed to work. It's kind of very binary. Like
Yeah.
You either route this config or you route that config. If you've got two separate configs, to quote Mark Torlemke on our team, a man who has two watches doesn't know what time it is. So
Yeah. The theory behind that is that any clients going to a traffic router that has the old config, nothing has changed for them. So they'll just continue to function. And a subset of clients will get the new change, which is something you're trying to push out anyway and verify. So based on that,
You want to do this Netflix style.
yes. Based on that, there's no, nobody has two watches. Everyone just has different watches at different times.
They're getting the updated watch.
yeah, I understand. We can continue.
Yeah, and there is to your other point, there is still an impact in this model, but minimizing the impact is generally better with live customers if you're only taking out 100,000 people versus 1 million people. Okay, so the workaround is on each traffic router in succession. In cache.properties in the traffic router, you set this parameter, cache config JSON refresh period, to some huge number, so that basically longer than your config window or your maintenance window. Restart Tomcat, and then perform the configuration change or upgrade. Snapshot CRConfig. The traffic monitors will pull the CRConfig. On each traffic router, then you remove the line, restart Tomcat again, and it will go back to the default of 60 seconds, and when you restart Tomcat, it'll pull the new config down. Then you verify, and then you do that on the rest of the traffic routers.
Be an easier way just to install IP tables and block it. You won't get refresh cache and all that kind of stuff, but it won't take.
That will probably work. Let me go to the next. So yeah, that will probably work. Or like you said, if you admin down the traffic router, that will also, although the wait an hour thing is actually my fourth, because that's an hour means you bring it down, do stuff, bring it back up, wait another hour, so that extends your maintenance window by 2 hours.
Not exactly, right?
Yeah, because
You bring it down for
the TTL has to expire without it in there.
Yeah,
TTL has
We
to
always
expire
change our
with it in
TTLs
there,
ahead of
then you
time.
do your maintenance. And TTL
that's a question in a later
without
slide.
it.
Basically, why is it an hour?
Well, I mean, it's
not
up
that
to you.
long.
Okay.
Depending on the cache. quite a lot.
Yeah, well, just more like if you've seen any drawbacks to making it 30 seconds, if there's any performance impact or.
Ask your upstream DNS people.
Okay.
If you know you're going maintenance window, you can change it then.
That's what we do. We just change it temporarily.
Okay, so you change it we're getting a little ahead, but you change
Yeah,
it before the maintenance window.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay.
We do it down to 5 minutes or whatever. So 300 seconds.
What did you change?
The TTL for the traffic router's traffic
For the TR.
routers, or the NS records.
And does that will take an hour to propagate as well,
It
right?
takes an hour for whatever, if there was a resolver that made that lookup just prior to you making that change, then
Right.
it would take the full duration of that TTL.
Or whatever the TTL was beforehand for that to flush out. Okay.
You also have to be very acutely aware of your minimum TTL in your zone. Actually, wait, no, you don't have to in this case. I'm sorry, that's something different. That is
Yeah.
something that's very important, but it isn't related to this system.
Okay, remind me to ask you about that later, because we did have questions about that recently.
You also have to be aware you probably have clients that don't respect that TTL. Yeah, you definitely do.
But that actually gets you around this problem.
That's the client's problem.
So, yeah, but it could still be an outage.
It still could. I mean, I think all that's really going to do, or is it the client or the DNS server that needs to respect it? I thought it was caching on the DNS side.
But I would guess the odds are for the client not respecting it more than the odds of the server not respecting it.
Well,
Okay.
Historically, it's.
Client's just going to go to the local DNS though.
Well, if it's an HTTP delivery service, they
Right.
would have the routing record for the traffic router cache for whatever that TTL is set to. So it's in that answer list as well for whatever period of time.
Okay.
Again, you're still assuming the client is smart.
There's a little bit of that in here. So I just threw down a couple of thoughts on how to potentially solve this. Have something similar to queue updates for traffic routers, or probably what would be more appropriate considering traffic routers generally are supposed to be binary. Have a setting where you can block updates on a particular traffic router until you clear it, and then the updates get pulled. I did have a question in here, just to ask, is it actually a guarantee that old CRConfigs will always work on newer traffic routers, or is traffic router always going to be backwards compatible with old traffic ops? And it seems like in general, you said you've never had a problem, and
No, I mean,
I'm trying to
I
think
can't
of.
say like we always do this. we
Always
do
is
that.
promising
a long time, yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
Exactly. But I would say, generally speaking, out of all of our components, at least as it stands right now, traffic router has the best ability to do that.
Okay.
And typically when we put features into traffic ops, we're also putting them into traffic router, so we're usually working kind of closely with both sides. So
Okay.
it's usually not a huge deal.
yeah.
If you want to upgrade, okay, your app is for posting. Which components will you update first?
If we had to do the whole stack?
Yeah.
I mean, it kind of just depends on what went into that version,
You
but,
cannot know, you're in the open source community.
I mean,
I have a
what are
committee.
you asking me? I mean,
No, we need
you gotta
to-
upgrade all of them, it doesn't really matter. I mean, it depends on what is in there,
The
really.
better question is, if you enable a new feature, where do you do that and how do you roll it out? You can't enable a new feature in traffic ops when traffic server and traffic router and those type of things don't support it yet,
Right.
right? So you want to put the support out in the field first, and then you want to enable the feature.
And that's
That's
why it
kinda how
depends
you
on
do software
what's in that version, because you may have to stack the order of things differently.
Now, if I can
I mean,
just,
nobody said it wasn't complicated, it is complicated, but this is a big system.
If I can just-
Tease that out.
so one issue with that and knowing what's in each version is that we can assume that the people who are qualifying each version are the ones who will actually be performing the upgrades. And oftentimes the people performing the upgrades rely on a procedure to perform the upgrade that's supposed to be invariant. And where deviation from that procedure is usually, at best, they are, their manager will say they shouldn't have deviated. And they're not necessarily going to know how to switch up the order based on each version.
Right, but it isn't incumbent upon them to figure that out. The people that have done the certification in the lab prior to handing that smart pop should have figured that out.
Yeah, but then we have to rewrite it every release.
Maybe
You
there's
have
a,
to do that anyway. There's no cookbook that says you do this component, that component, that component.
but
That's just
maybe
not
we
how it
can
works.
make one, Jeff. Maybe we can make one. Let's say that you did an upgrade that was only, it didn't enable any new features,
It
right?
won't matter what order you upgrade.
But then let's make one up, is what he's
Yeah.
saying.
So the
I don't
agreement
think-
should
when is
be,
it gonna
don't
matter?
put in a change that immediately takes effect without having some sort of toggle wrapped around it.
Yeah.
That that should be the
But
agreement,
When have
not
we
the
ever
order
put
to
in a
do.
change though? When have we ever put in a change that must be applied and we're doing something in ops that has to be there first, or doing something in the router? I mean, it's almost always backwards compatible.
Yeah.
And it mostly has to be.
Yeah, I mean, I feel like we spend a decent amount of time making sure that these things integrate properly so that when we're dropping code into the code base that both sides are solved for, and that if you upgrade one, this one doesn't break and vice versa. I don't think have formalized that, but maybe this is a good reason to do
Yeah.
that.
Yes,
Exactly.
that's what I would say is, and I should say we've never seen a backwards compatibility problem. We have encountered, the only thing that we've really encountered is because when we're messing with profiles and when we flip profiles over on upgrades where new profiles were imported with new parameter values, sometimes have certain, you can't have more than one, for example, you can't have multiple traffic routers in the same CDN have a different TTL for DNS because then you're violating DNS. So we've run into situations like that, but we have not seen a new traffic router choke on an old CRConfig. But just because we haven't seen it doesn't mean we can trust that it's maintained as backwards compatible.
So it sounds like you kind of have two distinct issues. One is some sort of guarantee, you need some sort of guarantee that when you deploy new code that it's not going to blow up in your face, number one.
Yes.
And number two, you want a way to target a CRConfig change to individual traffic routers before unleashing it into everything.
Yes.
Okay.
Okay, so what else is on here?
Jeff, what do you think? Reasonable? Too strict?
Useful. I don't want to judge your guys' use case based off of my own. So for our operations, I don't know that I mean, and I don't want to speak for our SREs either, but I would be surprised if they would make changes in that nature, apply to one traffic router and then roll it out. However, if we had that option available to us, maybe we would. I don't really know.
Yeah, and I was thinking something like a bunch of these other possibilities are not, like I was thinking something where just a toggle switch where you can just say stop polling on traffic routers wouldn't be that big of a change, but would enable this and might, in the event that, years from now there is a change that gets in that works an old traffic router, new traffic router, it can prevent it.
So the problem with that is you would have to push that out via a CRConfig snapshot. So
Yes, okay.
One thing, do you have a lot more slides or?
I have I mean, this is good discussion, so.
One thing just real quick, we're working on an effort called self-service, which you might have heard of obviously, and part of that is a requirement to kind of divorce our delivery service configurations from the traffic router, like this is how a traffic router works configuration versus all the delivery services, the topology, all of these things need to be able to be managed independently and changed independently, which isn't exactly this.
Yeah.
But it makes a lot
But
better.
it makes it much more targeted, and the main reason for that is more something that Comcast does care a lot more about, which is we run DNSSEC, and every time you snapshot, it's a very expensive process to re-sign every single zone.
Okay.
And so if we could say, well, because most of the time when you hit snapshot, you're actually only changing one delivery service or a handful. You're
Right.
not pushing out, 300 delivery service changes at once.
Yeah.
So, does not make sense to dump all of those signatures on the floor, right? You've already done that computation.
Right.
Why just ignore it? So through that process, we're going to break all this stuff out. So that will help a little bit. I think it might make some of these targeted config changes a little bit easier.
Yes.
Okay.
But we still have to have a notion of being able to say which traffic router gets the config first.
So again, I'll be talking about self-service in like a couple hours.
All right.
You should definitely, think about when I share how our plan is. Think about how it's going to affect this.
Right.
I think it might mitigate or even obviate some of the concerns you have here.
Okay.
I also think the way we're planning on doing self-service might make some of the things we do here a lot more straightforward and simple. So,
Okay.
So just to give you a really quick preview, our plan is kind of based on timestamps, and also the traffic ops will have to be aware of the CRConfig timestamp of that every router has. And so again, if you think about how
Okay, yeah.
this, we could even put the logic in traffic ops to push out certain CR configs to certain routers and based on that timestamp. So I
Okay.
think the stuff we're doing for self-service might make this.
All right.
We still need the targeting capability.
Yeah.
But yeah, the like rollback in particular, that is something that we have talked about. Once we get
Right.
versioning on the CR configs, we can very easily do that.
Well, they do have the CR configs do have. I should definitely move on.
But we don't keep history of that right now.
No
We
history,
will in
yeah.
the future.
And that was actually I store old copies of traffic ops traffic monitor because
Right.
yeah, it would make rolling out a change easier.
Yep.
And we will get that implicitly with self-service.
Okay. So technically, the same problem exists for traffic. Technically, you have the same thing with traffic monitors, where we want to do rolling upgrades of them too. But I'm generally less concerned about traffic monitor because it doesn't use as much of the CRConfig parameters. It mostly seems to just look at what servers there are, their admin state, and I think it keeps track of delivery services and whether they're up or down. But I don't really look at that often.
Note that traffic monitor has another configuration file.
Monitoring
The
the based
monitor
on
config.
But that's-
that's specific.
Yeah.
Consider the monitor config as well when you discuss the sensor.
Oh yeah, no, that has to be in there. Anything that's inside of the CR config today has to be broken up, basically.
It's not in the CR config. I just discovered it configure.
Oh, are you talking about what it's pulling in traffic ops, traffic monitor?
The monitor, the put, for example,
Yeah, the
the
API.
global limit.
Yeah, but all that's going to get broken up.
All right, so yeah, as for the traffic monitors, I'm less concerned about it, and I feel like that's going to be nearly impossible based on the way that the traffic routers pull at random from the from each of the traffic monitors. So you're not going to be able to control what traffic router goes to which traffic monitor. So
You can add the ACL. Use architecture. Something like that.
you could, yeah,
Well, for load balancing, I don't think you want to because it should always be the same, but if it's not, there's a bigger issue.
yeah. So I mean, for the traffic monitors, we tend to just upgrade them or push them out, and
Because they're redundant, that's
Yeah.
fine.
and if a traffic monitor goes down, or the traffic, I think if all the traffic monitors go down, the traffic router will just keep doing what it was doing until
No, it's going to bypass.
it's going to bypass. Okay.
Bypass the word.
What?
Traffic ops directly.
I don't think.
No,
No, it'll just use the.
It uses the last health file, I thought.
Yeah.
it's
The last
No.
couple.
But see, if traffic monitors go away, traffic router will continue, and it'll just use the prior node state.
If the traffic monitors themselves all go down.
Yeah, it'll keep running. Should it?
Yeah, it'll use the last health it got.
Yeah, for sure.
It should.
I'm almost positive I tried this.
Me
If
too.
you find out otherwise, that's a bug, because it's supposed to run without it.
Yeah, I don't run with that.
It would start.
I mean, it might not start
Yes,
without
it will, it might have issues starting.
We're all saying the same thing at the same time.
Sorry, I should definitely move on.
You got time.
The last question I have here is one thing that we've talked about is the traffic routers. If we have traffic routers in like Denver and Philly, the traffic router doesn't necessarily serve Denver from Denver, Philly from Philly. It basically relies on the local DNS server to handle the load balancing. So I was just wondering if there was potentially a way to have the traffic routers serve their general location. I suspect the answer is not really, and you have to rely on DNS load balancing to do that.
Are you talking about the DNS part of traffic router or the
HTTP,
HTTP?
yeah. Because I think the way the load balancing on DNS works is it's related to ping time. It weights it based on ping time.
Depends on the DNS server.
Yeah. But if you are waiting based on ping time, you'll get kind of a poor man's geolocation out of it, in theory. But I'm going to move on anyway. All right, cache draining.
Yeah. So we've definitely explored that option.
Okay.
I'll leave that there.
Fair enough. That's about what I was expecting. It seems like a very difficult. So cache draining. In general, customers want seamless video experience. They don't want video to freeze while they're watching it. And as I mentioned before with the client stickiness, we've seen once a client is directed to a cache, it stays there until the user tunes the channel and then goes back to the traffic router.
Can I ask you a question about that?
Sure.
That's true for for what happens with syndication and Viper client. Is that, in your experience, true for other clients except the iOS client as well, or
Honestly, all the clients I've seen.
do it now?
We've had an example. There was one client we've seen that went to the traffic router for every
But
Every fragment?
every fragment, and
So-
that I believe that was believe that was corrected.
Yeah. So I
It was filed as a bug.
I would put an asterisk there because if you're using client steering and the client gets a 404 at all, it's going to switch over to a different delivery service.
Yeah, client steering is pretty rare though.
Right.
There's only one client.
But we should make a note
Client
internally,
steering? Oh, we have like 12 for those.
because you guys do have clients that are sort of out of your control as well, right?
Yes.
And we have, we have external customers on our CDN that we deliver video for, and they say, you can't do this 302 thing because we have so many clients, we can't guarantee that it'll work.
Okay. That is going to make the solution to this not work, or at least the one we have.
DNS delivery service with in Max Sensors 3 or something like that, and you go like, shit, that sucks.
And I believe with a DNS delivery service, you avoid this problem altogether.
Maybe, I don't know. Let's
Kind of,
go
well, I mean, it depends, the client will restart or will continue on a different IP, so.
Right. So, I mean, this is mainly for HTTP delivery services.
Yeah, the client should come
I
back to the
noticed-
traffic router if the current cache fails.
They don't all. Some of them just freeze.
most clients we encounter do.
I mean, we have all kinds of clients, right?
And sometimes
We can
they
only
do
control our
something.
X1 clients.
Have you seen?
They do.
Yeah.
Have you seen a lot of
Oh,
clients
really?
that do not recover from?
Yes.
TVE or?
More than one.
In Quilt, we are working. Quilt started as a transparent caching system that works with redirects, and
So
we haven't encountered a lot of those issues.
it fully depends on the client implementation.
Yeah, for sure, it does.
And because a 302 is a one-time deal, and then what ends up happening is when you're talking about video, it's a bunch of different HTTP requests. So the fact that you follow the 302 permanently, I don't think that is described in HTTP.
It is described in HLS now.
HLS,
And
yeah.
Epic Dash tried to put it in there as well.
Okay.
But it's not an HTTP thing. It's
Right.
It's really a higher protocol thing.
That doesn't mean the client, when he hits a glitch, can't go back to the original request and
Yeah.
get a new 302.
Yeah, but that's all.
That's just-
But the client has to store the the original request, and it has to know to append the new URL to it.
Right, but I'm saying if it encounters a problem, it should go back to that original.
It should,
I think we're
yeah.
all agreeing.
But
We're
Yeah.
all agreeing it's
They
a
frequently
client.
don't.
Everyone
Yeah.
agrees.
Client
So the
side.
CDN is.
So, gonna move on. So.
Have a client summit.
Assuming that this happens, and the clients stick, and that the CDN can't redirect it once it's been unplanned failures, you're stuck. There's nothing you can do. But if you're doing an upgrade or planned maintenance, or especially emergency changes, which usually have a time frame, you can potentially do this by making the cache aware that it's offline.
Yeah.
Um,
What does it do then?
Well, temporary solution, which actually this is based on a script that Eric wrote. Modify the remap.config to first stash the old one, and second, replace every map line with a redirect temporary to send a 302 back to the traffic router URL for that particular delivery service. And this is when a cache goes admin down. And then traffic line -x.
Do you guys do that now?
Not in production yet. We are still testing that. So the procedure would be you'd admin down the cache snapshot CRConfig, so it goes down on the router. Confirm the cache is admin down in traffic monitor. This is extremely important. Run maintenance script above. Do maintenance, and then when you're done, put the previous remap back, and then bring the cache back online.
Yeah.
Now, there are a couple of caveats. If the cache is not admin down when you run the script, you end up in a 302 redirect loop.
Because it's consistent hashing.
Yeah.
That's so good.
If 302's probably, I got it. I tried this with curl. I think it goes to 50 302s and then tells you it's just done.
Yeah, ATS will start kicking in.
Yeah.
I think.
depending on how many clients you have on a particular cache, you're gonna incur whatever your HLS, if you're doing HLS, whatever your segment length is, you're gonna incur however many requests are that cache is serving right now onto the traffic router within the segment length. So if it's 2,000 clients on a cache and you have 2-second segments, it's gonna be 1,000 requests per second added to the traffic router for that time.
Yeah.
And this is we're still kind of evaluating. We don't think that's going to trip out the traffic router, but that's the part we're still testing.
Especially if it's in a maintenance window when traffic is low. So
Yeah, but
We do
true. That's one thing we've considered, is that usually when we're going to be doing the maintenance on the caches, it'll be well below what the maximum peak viewership is. For this to work, it does assume a couple of client behavior things. One being clients need to follow more than one. Their 302 redirect limit needs to be greater than 1, which probably is. And one that we're not sure about is the client needs to be able to, because the 302 is only per segment by HTTP standard, that means that the client must be caching somewhere the new URL and the new FQDN once it follows the 302 the first time. And we need to make sure that if we give it a 302 at something other than a top-level manifest, that it actually persists that. That is technically unknown without knowing the client implementation.
If it doesn't, you can't solve the problem.
Right.
If it doesn't, there's nothing you can do.
Right, then you're
We actually saw
Stuck.
that. We had a client that was doing that. We would redirect them away and they would just come right back.
What happened when we took the cache down?
And then they would get
Goes
right
away.
there. No.
This is
All right. And the one last, this is not going to work for DNS delivery services, but again, DNS delivery services may not have this problem of stickiness, considering they're served by the either DNS cache or the traffic router all the time.
But
We're not usually doing video over
it depends. It depends, though. We do a lot of video over DNS delivery
topic.
services. Yeah. It depends a little bit, and I think there's still something you want to do there, right? For instance, you could send a connection close, and you know, take it for DNS. You take it out of service, take it admin down. You wait till the TTL expires, then you send the connection close. Client sees this connection close, looks in the DNS list. It should have been refreshed and goes to a new cache.
Okay.
You give them a little bit more chance to do the right thing. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
You'll absolutely have the same problem. Almost every client is going to cache the IP that it looks up from DNS at least for a little bit.
Yeah. Depends on DNS caching, yeah. Other questions. One thing we were investigating is could basically what this script does be orchestrated by traffic ops? But the one thing about this is that the timing for CRConfig updates, as well as, because the CRConfig update has to happen before this gets run.
We still have the snap and queue order of operations anyway, so.
Yeah, okay. But it's the other way for admin ups, but I guess this doesn't matter for admin ups, so
This will be backwards, so you'd snapshot first.
yeah.
And then you go.
I don't know. You want to be careful with that.
I mean, this is what John's working on the maintenance part.
But if you are,
That's what we're gonna say when he's done.
but if you snap and queue at 19 or at 29:45, and you happen to end up with traffic router and monitor are perfectly in line and just pull each other, and then if
You have to snapshot, make sure it's admin down, in traffic monitor, then queue update.
Yeah, and there is some verification. I have it backwards. If the traffic monitor and router take the full 2 minutes or whatever to propagate, and the queue happens first, you have an outage.
Yeah.
So, but just FYI, so all of the data to do that automatically is going to come with self-service. It has to.
Cool. Okay, I should definitely stay for your talk.
And we also are. Who here is Jeff or Evan? Who's the closest to the maintenance plugin that John has been off and on working on?
Yeah, got that. Cache is clear.
Oh, I'm just bypassing. I mean, this was good discussion. These are just.
So we are working, as Jan was going towards, John Rushford is working on an ATS plugin that knows when it's in maintenance mode.
Yeah. Okay.
And it does something similar.
Something similar to those last couple
We
bullets.
might need to do some tiers, because I don't think we at the time, we considered the temporary remap, I don't know. Are
He
you
was gonna do it through you.
You're gonna send these,
I'll send these out. Yeah.
Trevor on the videos too.
I do want to get to traffic ops profiles because so I'm just going to move on. So ops profile management.
You thought you were gonna be through this? in
I thought this would be. 10 minutes. File a Jira and sit
I
down.
told you there would be a lot of conversation.
No, but this is good. So you have traffic ops track server configuration through profiles. Profiles depend generally on the hardware model and the application version of generally ATS. Some of the profiles have over 300 parameters in them, specifically ATS, and many parameters are fairly esoteric, or at the very least, I don't know what like half of them do in the ATS profiles.
You know the other half, you should do a talk on that.
I know a decent number of. I've learned a couple of them based on some things I'll get to. So on upgrade, there's a question of which parameters from the old profile need to be carried over. Generally, anything that the user changed, you're probably going to want to keep it. But as for defaults, which parameters cannot be preserved that were defaults from the 5.3.2 ATS? For example, HostDB. I didn't know what that did until I upgraded a lab server, forgot to change the profile, and the server could not make any DNS calls out, and ended up finding out it was because of the HostDB size. So that was a default that changed in the 6.2.2 profile that was necessary for functioning.
Yeah, I think everybody did.
And the big and the main question that everyone, like other operators, are asking is there a way to automate this profile conversion process? Even if there are multiple hardware models among your edge caches where you're going to be doing more than one merge, because generally, if you have more than one hardware model, you have more than one profile in production, and then you're going to have to merge new defaults into both of them, knowing which parameters to hold and which ones not to. Another thing we run into sometimes is if you have multiple traffic ops users, it's not 100% clear which parameters have been changed, who changed them. There are audit logs in traffic ops, but they by default only go back a month, and we have some deployments where we've got parameters that changed years ago, and we need to end up tracking back where they came from.
The
And if they
database has it though, the UI doesn't, but the database.
The API has it, you just need to extend the window. It defaults to 1,000 rows for comeback.
Okay. Oh, for the
Limit. Can you specify the limit is whatever?
for the audit log.
Yeah.
Okay.
So you can override it? Override it now.
So the way we deal with this right now, I have this as temporary solution, but it's a very manual process. We leave the default profiles as is, and any production profile is cloned off of the default. So we never change the default profiles. Then when we upgrade, we compare the profiles in production with the old defaults and the new defaults. We generally only need to do this maybe for one server. We don't do this for every server, but anything that matches the old default in the production profile but does not match the new default, we assume that it's a changed default, it was changed for a reason, and we change it in the production profile. Basically, we import the new value. Here, that would be 622. Anything that matches neither default, we assume a user put in, and we leave it there. And then we change the server profile after. I might have this a little bit. The order doesn't necessarily matter, but we change the server profile before running the Orton badass mode on the cache and re-downloading whatever is new, and then adminning the server back up. Why did that happen? Yeah. So how to automate profile merges? Best thoughts I have are the production profiles on upgrade, anything with a running server attached to it, can read in the new defaults from the new ATS profile, basically doing what was the procedure outlined on the last slide. And to do this, if you can keep track of which parameters are defaulted, then you can merge it following the criteria on the last slide. You can compare if the parameter is defaulted in the old profile and it's changed in the new one with the default, you can automatically import it. Now this doesn't necessarily, another way to do it would be to keep track of parameter history or version tags. This doesn't really cover parameters that have been changed by the user. Again, if you're going to automate it, you could have the changed parameters stay where they are. But a question came up while I was making these slides. What if a parameter has been changed but actually needs to change again for the new ATS version? So there was a suggestion for some kind of almost like a wizardy thing where it diffs the parameter profiles, and anything that's different, it asks you, do you want to keep the old one, keep the new one, or enter something different? And then, actually, I'll just pause here if there's any discussion for this or any thoughts on this.
There's delivery-specific stuff that goes in there that could be dangerous,
All the
header rewrite, mid rewrite.
Yeah.
URI signing.
So there are a lot of those parameters that are created. I think this is what you mean by delivery specific, but a lot of them are created not by the user, but when you make the config change in the delivery service, they're dumped into the parameters table kind of without the user knowing.
Yeah.
When you upgrade, a bunch of those are not re-added necessarily to the new profiles. And if you're using a new profile, you need to know to copy those over. Now, when we do this, because we're diffing them anyway, we'll see those parameters will exist in the production ones. They'll show up as undef in the new one, so we know we need to move it over. And that's pretty much a no-brainer. Anything that's undef, we keep.
That's going to move to the delivery service profile at some point, because they're delivery service specific. But
I do not know
I do
what
not
the
know
plan
what
is
the-
there.
yeah.
this is a problem. Like you export a
I was
profile
waiting for
production.
Rob to say that self-service solves this problem.
Self-service
It's 9 out of 10.
Because you can't export a profile from the lab put it in production.
Yeah.
It's going to be missing all these
Yeah.
fields.
Actually, I think actually service profile might get in the way of self-service.
Yeah.
It is.
If you implement self-service, it's more than a service profile.
Yeah.
But you're gonna do, somebody's gonna do something about config files and the mess and how we push them out, right? And I think that'll break take and bake, that'll break the config files, the location parameter, all that stuff's gotta go. We all agree? I think we don't even have to have a vote.
I like take and bake.
Take and bake is nice, but it's really hard.
We're breaking the profile. We're assigning multiple profiles to a server.
We talked about that as well. I don't know,
Server
are
profile.
we doing the profile parameter mess breakup? Is that in the plan now?
It's not in the plan for self-service, so
Really?
the self-service plan is to try to do self-service and solve the problem like queue update.
I thought the
snapshot.
self-service plan was to make Rob do everything.
The plan is
What's
to
the
do
matter?
as minimal work, as minimal API changes as possible.
Okay.
And so all of the things like that we want to do, but it's not strictly necessary.
Alright,
So
so we're stuck with this for a little
It's a
bit.
good, it's, yeah.
it's
Okay.
100% support breaking them up.
All right. The
It's
only
a big problem for someone to tackle.
Yeah, and this is one thing that just the merging, and it requires a decent amount of knowledge of what you're actually merging. It's not something. And fortunately, the only time I can think of that we've ever actually had this be a big deal was when we went from 5.3.2 to 6.2.2 for ATS. And we ended up, I think there were like 30 or 40 parameters that changed, and we had to sift through all of them. But generally, I know that when we upgraded to TC2, there were new profiles that came in, but there were only a handful of things that changed. And generally, I don't think there were many changes between like 1 whatever and 1 whatever plus 1.
It is something that we want to put on the medium-term roadmap for somebody to tackle this whole profile mess.
By the way, the whole DB stuff was supposed to be handled in traffic server code. I don't think the protection ever worked.
Handy dandy
I would love to normalize it.
Yeah, that was a fun one actually. That we were staring at DNS servers for a little bit and DNS configuration, and it ended up having.
Right, it's the same thing in delivery services. We've got all these fields that only apply to HTTP services and only we're denormalized all over the board.
Yeah, but I mean, I know that the UI for that will actually, it only shows the fields that are relevant, and I know that DNS and HTTP delivery services are fundamentally different, so that's a big reason for that. Last, I think I'll skip the DNS TTL one because we did touch on that before, and I am over time. The last thing is there is currently a uniqueness constraint on parameters for name file value, and I was wondering why it's not name config file, because this allows you to set the same value.
Because you want to be able to do that. You want to have servers that run the old setting and servers that run the new setting.
In the same with the same profile though? Within the same profile?
Parameters, the constraint is on just parameters. It's not on parameter plus profile. What you're saying is maybe we should put not allow you to have profile ID name value.
Name config file.
Yes.
Yes.
Yeah, and I agree with that.
Yeah, yes, that's missing from the slide, but yeah.
The constraint is not. The constraint is name, config file, and value.
Yeah, but there is nothing preventing you from setting two different values on a profile, and that can screw things up.
Yeah, you're right. I agree. That should probably be a bug.
Yeah. The only question I had is if there's ever a case, like I've done some stuff where I set two values for the traffic ops syncds cron with the intent of having the ORT run in two different modes at two different intervals. And I believe that required name and config file to be the same on the same profile with two different values.
I'm sure Taken Back has some reasons to do it too.
Yeah, so this isn't something that's just...
It's a brilliant
Get put it in order, too.
And each line has to be its own parameter.
I don't know how long we're going to be sitting on the profile parameter. If we are sitting on it, we probably want to fix that as a bug.
Okay.
But we need to talk to Jeremy and see how he thinks.
I believe the profile is the one that is intuitive.
We're
right.
totally fine in my head.
So I'm just going to blow through these last two then. This is the issue that we briefly touched on during the traffic router discussion before, where when you admin down a traffic router, you have to wait by default an hour, and this will extend your maintenance window by 1 down, 1 up, so up to 2 hours, which in the field can be sort of draining. And really the only question that really I had was, is there any drawbacks that anyone has noticed to lowering that TTL? But it seems like what you generally do is you lower it before the maintenance window. You
at least an hour before.
An hour before the maintenance window, which you still then need to it still extends something by an hour, but you can actually, but not really, because you don't necessarily need to verify the TTL within a maintenance window. You can just verify the config updated and then trust DNS to do its. And then you're really just trusting a downstream DNS server, and then you're good for your maintenance window. And then when you set it back, you just verify that it gets set back. That happens in 30 seconds, and you're good.
Make sure you do it for both DNS records and the single A and quad A records.
Yeah.
Because you have to get it to drop out of the DNS plumbing via DNS records, and then you also have to get it to drop out of the routing name for HTTP delivery services.
We don't worry
for
so much
video
about it.
in particular.
Okay.
Clients recover real
But
quick.
yeah, just set it to.
So that's TTL and routing name.
There's the TTL on the delivery service itself.
Okay.
We do that.
We do that through the database. Yeah, it's pretty hokey. We don't have a good way to do that through the UI.
Oh,
We go
okay.
into the database and we change the TTL for all the HTTP delivery services to 3600.
Yeah.
Or from 3600 to 300 or 600, and then we add them down, snapshot, and then
Okay. We don't really do anything through the database, and we definitely can't pass that on to operations
well,
people.
we need to probably put an issue in.
Okay.
How to do that, I'll do that right now.
All right, thanks.
It's probably, it's probably good enough to do it on the other ones because DNS clients behave.
Well, what I've generally seen is that the client, or at least when I just use test clients, the clients don't really do much DNS caching. It's mostly the nearest server does it. I think clients will cache DNS very. I think Windows machines, if you're using like an HTTP client on Windows, I think that uses net something to NetSock or something to cache DNS, but because usually a lot of the time if they tell you to flush it.
Right.
So, but if using like curl on a Linux client, it won't cache it. I don't know what set-tops do.
The set-tops, we've had to beat the crap out of our set-top team to make sure that they treat everything correctly. So they're pretty good now, and we had to do that specifically because of EAS.
So they followed the set-tops themselves follow the TTLs?
Yes. Well, no, because they get the IP, but
Yeah.
they don't hang on to things. They don't hang on to the wrong server.
Okay.
They actually make sure that they don't pay attention to the TTL and
Okay.
they go upstream.
Okay.
We've just, I mean,
Yeah.
EAS, years going back with IP video, both linear, VOD, we've seen all kinds of weird things. We've seen clients that go 302 back to, or they go back to traffic router for every fragment. Every time we've found one of these, we've worked with our various teams in Comcast to resolve that. So by the time people like you are seeing X1 deployed out into the field, it's already pretty solid in that respect.
Yeah, and I feel like in general caching on the client is not. You can get yourself into some bad situations doing that. So.
They used to do that.
Okay.
A long time ago, they used to do that.
Yeah. All right. I am out of slides, so unless there's anything else, I'm done.
I have one question.
Sure.
The whole discussion about admin down and traffic routers, should we document that somewhere in the traffic control documentation? It's kind of a fishy process, right?
You mean the whole changing TTLs for maintenance windows? Yeah, I'll put that on.
Well, it doesn't seem like there's a way to do it through the UI.
Right.
But that doesn't mean there's not a way to do it through the API.
Right.
So if you can't go to the database directly, which is fast, you could write a simple Python script to pull all your delivery services.
Yeah.
Change the TTL and do a put.
And that is something we can. That is something we
You can
can.
write a script that does it.
That's something we can pass to operations.
But we
That's fine.
should- I mean, this can be done through a single SQL statement, and rather than having, I mean, yes, that's definitely something you can do, but it's horribly inefficient and error prone if there's something that happens in the middle of all of those posts, if you have,
Yeah.
solar flares, whatever. So it would be a whole lot easier if you could just say, do it by this type of delivery service on this CDN, and then it's a single operation.
In the database, you mean?
No, do it through the API. We don't have
Okay.
that. What I'm saying is we need that because it's too inefficient to do it on an individual delivery service.
Oh, I see.
When we can do this via one SQL statement.
Okay. Yeah.
I'll put a note for that.
The only thing I'm afraid of is.
I'm making an issue in Git.
Oh, even better. That's better than my handy dandy notebook. Yeah.
The only thing I'm worried about with the SQL, like passing down SQL statements, is that theoretically a missed asterisk or an extra asterisk can make things get out of hand, or you might.
This API you would say.
Yeah.
You would just give it like a delivery service type and then a CDN
Right.
ID, and with those two pieces of information, and then a new TTL value, and then between those three pieces of information, it just plugs them into the SQL statement and you're done.
Well,
Okay.
Until tomorrow. I was looking at the schedule when it's up.
All right. Any other?
Thank you.
Thank you. No, I hope this was useful.
All right, following the